Hey everyone. Make sure I turn down this volume here. Let me know if there's an echo. I don't hear one. All right. I'm going to open this chat, and it is not letting me do that. Oh, what's that, guys? Okay. How you doing? Hopefully everything looks good. All right, I'm on a bit of a delay because I'm checking out this software so we can get some better sound quality. So cool. And Jeff Sheets is telling me it's looking good. No echo and all that's good. Okay, how's everybody going tonight? How's everything going? That's not really quite a proper sentence, but there's like 18 things going on my screen. So I wanted to make sure I say hi. So yeah, I'm just here to kind of answer some questions tonight, talk about some new courses and things that are going on. Hey Phil, how's it going? All right, so first thing is hello. Any questions you guys have, I'm happy to answer tonight. We've got a good hour to hang out. All right, so let's dig into it. All right, first things first. It's out, and I thank all you people for their huge support for this record. That's taken a lot of time to come out, and a lot of work and energy on for me and Robin Ford, and I'm super psyched. I know a lot of you guys bought it, and there is also an excellent giveaway at TrueFire right now. Oh, good. Everything sounds great. Okay. At TrueFire right now, where Robin and I have signed 25 copies of this, so you can go there right now. A little link. I'm sure somebody will put that up there on the side there for a giveaway. For the record, 25 copies, and you can also get some free lessons, and we can get some discounted stuff from TrueFire and my courses and Robin's courses. So thank you very much, everyone. It's been really great. Looks like it's charting on a few places, so I'm super psyched about that. And I am happy to announce that I'm doing, first of all, there's the giveaway right there. Okay. Robin and I are doing a workshop together at Sweetwater coming up at the end of April. So if you go to Sweetwater's page, you can see us there. And following that, I have a week of dates on the road with Robin where we'll be playing a number of songs from the record. So super, super cool. All right, that's first thing. Next thing up is I have a new course coming out. I have a course on, it's an In the Jam. It's my first In the Jam. I'm really psyched about it. So it's a blues In the Jam, and I covered about 10 tunes, and I thought of songs that were really, jams that were really, really important for the guitar player to kind of dig into. So in them, I just kind of, in the jam, I jam over it, which is really hip. And you can bring up and down the volumes of each of the tracks. So you can bring me down, which I would highly recommend. And you can bring up the other tracks and all that. So the In the Jam stuff is really fun. And other guys have done them, and I've really enjoyed them. So I think it's a really great. I'm going to turn this to my phone. I've already spoken to Jeff, so everything is good. So I'm going to turn my phone down so I don't look at it. Technology. So the In the Jam is really totally fun. I'm looking forward to this coming out. It's coming out really soon, and you can do a pre-order on that right now. So, all right. So, just want to start digging into some questions. Maybe, where do you buy the record? CD Baby. Now, if you want to purchase a copy, you can get it at CD Baby, and also you can stream it on Amazon and iTunes and the evil Spotify and things like that. So, all right. All right. Let me just answer a few questions. All right. So. Off the top. Okay, yes. Off the top. All right, guys. Sorry. Okay, there's no camp at Full Moon this year. Full Moon, Rob and I would continue to do a workshop up in upstate New York called his Traveling Dojo at Full Moon, and we're not doing that this year at Full Moon. Any advice on playing over chord changes, and how do you approach this? Absolutely. Okay, well, I have a few courses out. I've got chord tone soloing, which would be a great place to start, and soloing on the changes. And my approach to that, and I talk about it in pretty much every one of my courses, is thinking about the changes of the chords, right? So if I've got to say a chord progression, it comes down to triads, really what it comes down to, and knowing the names and notes in each of your chord. So one easy way to look at it, so if I look at, let me get this little jam track up, and I'll show you. So I'm going to talk about C, F, and G. So give me a second here to find this track. So C, F, and G, some of you guys are in my classroom, take the private lessons with me, have heard this track. So, this the one? No. Here, it's all right. It's live. Okay. So I have a C, F, and G chord progression here, right? I'm going to go to my F. So I'm just thinking about the chord change, and that my G. So first thing I'll do is think about what notes are in a C chord. So I'll just look at them in a shape. Right, there's a C chord. There's an F chord. Right. And then back to C. And an F. Sorry, G. So I'm going to solo over this using just those triad shapes. So I'm going to hit the chord tone. So C. No. Because of my G chord, right? Watch now. C, G, E, and my F chord. Mix it in with the pentatonic scale. Here's my G chord. So thinking about a G shape. My F chord, right? Back to my C. To a G chord. Back to C. So if you look at what I'm doing, I'm really just outlining the shapes of the chords. So let me see if I can get this little camera angle here. All right, so my first chord was C. Thinking about that C chord. There's my F chord. Back to my C chord. Then with my G chord, I can do up to here. F, C. So I'm really thinking about this stuff as basically as I can. C is spelled C-E-G, so I'm going to look for all my C chords. So you can even just rely on chord shapes, right? I'm thinking, well, F, G, and C. Okay, so I'm playing C, F, and G in a position. So this will be a course coming up. What do you guys think? All right, so that's quickly a quick thing there, playing over chord changes and how I think about it. All right, let me jump ahead. Can you detail your practice regimen? Sure. How to keep? All right, hold on. Any tips on incorporating a thumb pick into soloing? No. I don't play with a thumb pick unless I'm playing Delta blues. It's the only time I use a thumb pick. So I find them, they're not my favorite things to use, but they really work well. But definitely not something I can talk at any kind of length about in any authority. Any tips on keeping other strings silent while bending? Absolutely. Yeah, it's a left hand and a right hand muting technique. So let's talk about that right hand first. So, boom. All right, so if I'm playing, let's just say I'm going to bend. Just going to bend this E up a whole step. What I want to do on this hand first is the heel of my hand comes over and rests on the bridge of the guitar, and I'm muting the lower strings. So I want that G string, so I'm muting my E, A, and D strings just by the heel of my hand, and even this part of my thumb. Like, so see where the string kind of was? Let me press really hard. So you see that area right there? And that's where I'm leaning in the string, right? So covering the strings with this, so I'm muting my lower strings. And how I mute my higher strings will be with the right hand. So if I look, my left hand. So I'm going to take that same note. So my first finger flops over a little bit and mutes those higher strings. So this is going on. And so that's getting the higher strings. And if you look at the lower strings, that's getting covered with this part. So if I could strum through everything, the only note that's really ringing out is that, because I'm muting with both the left hand and the right hand. Right, so I can bend that note. And sometimes if I'm really kind of digging into a bend or vibrato, I might actually take my ring finger and my index finger and put them on the higher string. So the only thing that's ringing out is my G string, because I'm muting with the high string, the low strings with the heel of my hand, and the higher strings with my first finger and my second finger. Middle finger and ring finger. And I can move that up and down like this. So at any point in time, the only string, hopefully, that I want to have ringing out is the one that's ringing out, because I'm muting all the other strings. All right. Hopefully that would help. Okay. Could you tell a practice regimen? Sure. Hold on. These are all good questions. Okay. Let me go through this. Okay. A practice regimen. Sure. I always practice some sort of technical stuff every day, whether it's scales, which I still practice scales all the time, with the metronome. So I have one in my phone. I try to turn off the internet on my phone. I'll just put it on airplane mode, because if not, it's just a total distraction. Not always successful, but I try to do that because I found that the internet is to be the biggest time waster when it comes to practicing, and I fall guilty to it, prey to it as well. So that aside, I'll just put on a metronome and I'll just start running through some scales with the metronome. Because scales they're super important in keeping your technique together, and they become a little, I won't say mindless. I look at them as kind of a meditative thing. So if I'm practicing a scale, it's like a C major, when I'm practicing the scale, I'm always thinking about a few things. One, playing with the metronome, playing it in time, and playing it cleanly. If I'm playing it too quickly, if I play, it can get sloppy, is what I'm saying. So I try to avoid getting sloppy. So I really try to focus in on keeping the scale clean and not picking a tempo that's too fast. So if I'm kind of, and stumbling, then I'll just slow down the metronome. And you can kind of work up to it. And the great thing about the metronome is it doesn't really lie. If you can't do it, you just can't do it. So you got to slow down the metronome to a tempo that you can go through. Also, I'm always thinking about music when I'm playing. So I don't have a metronome hooked up right now, but if I'm thinking like 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm always trying to play the scale. Nice and evenly with the tempo. And I want to try to always think of music. This is my most important thing I can say to you about this, is I'm always trying to think about music. So, in other words, if I'm going to play a scale, I'm not going to go, like I'm not going to yell with the guitar. I'm going to try to have a feel along with the metronome, playing eighth notes, ba boom ba boom ba boom ba boom, right? Kind of nice and musical as opposed to ba 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 ba. Like this sort of. I try to think about it. Is it music? Would I like to hear somebody practice a scale like that? Because when you hear somebody who's really great playing even scales, it's amazing because you hear the music in the scale. So that's something to think about as you do it. And when I said about a meditative thing, is just concentrate on the motions. And I found this. There's been like studies of it, articles about concentrating while you're doing something like this, whether it's free throws in basketball or something. I'm just always thinking about the muscles. What does the scale feel like? So I mean, it's kind of like a bit of a sort of zen-y approach to it. But when you're playing music and you're really into it, it is that kind of thing. You don't want to think about this stuff, and this is the work you do before you hit that stage or something like that. You want to work on your musicality, and practicing scales with the metronome is a really important way to do that. Okay, so that's part of the practice regimen. The other thing I would do is I try to learn other people's stuff all the time. All the time. I might not learn whole solos. Like I was trying to transcribe some John Scofield licks the other day. It's because I love Scofield, and I wanted to listen to a recording and go, wow, what is that? So it doesn't have to be something like Scofield. It can be anything. I always go back to Eric Clapton, Circuit Cream, and the Blues Breakers. Just if I'm kind of feeling a little stale and I want to learn something, I can always find something really great from that. So that's another thing I would do is don't bite off more than you can chew. Just a nice simple solo or a lick, and then take that lick and try to apply it elsewhere. So you have scales, and this is what I teach in my online classroom, is I break it down into 3 sections. So I have my fingerboard and technique, like the theory, practical application of that. So you're practicing your scales. Then I have vocabulary, which would be learning some other people's solos or trying to come up with some ideas of your own. But learning other people's stuff is a tried and true method of learning how to play an instrument. And you're learning somebody else's solo, not so you can just repeat it. You know what I mean? Like, hey, check me out. I can play the Stairway to Heaven solo. The idea is to build up the technique in your time and your vocabulary so you can take some of those ideas and apply them elsewhere. And then the third thing I would highly recommend, and I find a lot of people coming to me for lessons don't have, is a repertoire. So like a lot of my courses at TrueFire, I just tell people to work through those, like my 30 authentic blues grooves or 2 guitar blues grooves or blues rock grooves, volume 1 and volume 2, because learning all these tunes is what I did. So somebody calls out, Catfish Blues, you're like, okay. You just know the tunes. And that, if you're a jazz musician, is completely expected. So when I first moved to New York, I didn't know a lot of songs, and I went through jam sessions and really got my butt handed to me because I didn't know any songs. I just kind of knew some rock tunes. I didn't know how to play "Oh Darling" by the Beatles, and I didn't. So I'm standing on stage like an idiot, So I had to fix that really quickly. And any blues gig you get called to do, I got called to do a rock gig. You kind of need to know the songs. So that's one of the third things that I would practice on a technical way. So we have a technique, practical application of theory, stuff like that. Vocabulary, which is important, learning other people's things and making your own. TrueFire, all the blues licks courses, grab a lick that you like. I mean, God, there's so many great players at TrueFire that any of that kind of thing. But don't take too much. But find something in context. That's super important. So like I say, sometimes I just learn a Clapton solo because I just love the way he plays. And then I'll just work on his phrasing because it's going to be different than what I do. I'll take a lick and I'll just try to apply it elsewhere. And then also I'll learn the song. Okay, hopefully that answers that question. So we went in through this. What guitar is this, please? This is a Collings I-35LC. So it's kind of like a size down 335. And man, I love this thing. I got their 50s neck curve, so it's a little bigger. All the dorky questions. 6105 frets. Throwback. SLE 101 plus pickups to the fantastic people at Throwback and Collings. Strings. These are actually Diodario 10.5s. I usually like 10s, like on my Les Paul, like a 10. But on this guitar, the 10s felt a little light to me. So I put on 10.5s. I don't have the huge hands, so 11s can be a little rough for me sometimes, but I kind of might be making the move to 11s, especially live. I play a lot harder. So I noticed that on this guitar when I was playing it live, the 10s were too light, and it didn't feel really good, so I switched over to 10.5s. And the cool thing about string gauge is like each guitar can sometimes want its own different string gauge. Like what works as a 10 on that may not work as really nicely as on another Les Paul. I mean, there's all sorts of variables, but sometimes it's just easier. You can raise and lower the sat, like the tailpiece for more tension, but sometimes just changing the string gauge makes all the difference. All right. If you're a musician or aspiring to be, will there be egotistic types? Just ignore the. Sure. There's no shortage of jerks in the world. You just ignore them. Okay, chord tone song sounds great. Hey, thanks. Blah, 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 blah. How fast can I play? So fast the camera can't catch it. Okay. Do you push your... Hold on a second. Sorry. Love it as Z-Top lessons. Thank you, Eric, for the ZZ Top lessons. And thank you for Dan Mackey for the Like in the Now CD, which I'm really happy with. Do you push your technique to the edge every day? It's a good question. Yeah, sure. I always want to have better technique. So what is technique to me? Is it playing fast? Sure, partly. There's no shortage of musicians who have technique right now. I mean, if you go on Instagram, it's absolutely astounding what the kids can do today, you know. Sounds kind of silly, but technique is not what it used to be in the sense of it's super important, but a lot of people have technique. So for me, what I really look for in technique is being able to play what I hear in my head, right? So working on vibrato, bends, just nailing stuff that I want. So do I want to work on playing faster? Sure, I work on that all the time because you have to. You always want to be, say if you're on a gig, like I know for me personally, sometimes gigging, it takes a little while for me to warm up on stage or relax and get comfortable and play my best. And that usually most musicians will tell you that. If you're on the road touring for a while, it's a little easier. But if you're, get in your first gig and then boom, sometimes you're really kind of tense. So what I try to do is practice a lot before these kind of things. So I have a bit of an excess of technique that out more than I usually have. So if I can play up to this in my room or here, maybe on the stage I can play here comfortably. I might not make it there cleanly and comfortably, but if I feel like I'm in good shape and good condition by pushing the technique, that will benefit me on a stage for sure. Some days are better than others. It's just one of those kind of things. But technique, when we're talking about it, things that are really important for me for technique is having good vibrato, nailing your bends, just playing well. So for me, we've talked about guitar players that I've loved on these things. Like David Gilmour has great technique. Can he play fast? Moderately, but he sounds great. He nails what he goes for. My all-time favorite is Jeff Beck. Does he play fast? Not in the sense of, an obvious guy like Yngwie or something like that, but he has all his control, and so for me that is technique. So when I say, do you push your technique to the edge every day, I try to go for new things that I can use in my playing. So I see that as technique as well, as opposed to just playing faster. But I do work on playing faster, yes, of course. Trying to learn and apply the McErlain in an A. Please give me an example. Well, one thing, look at Mixolydian scale, there's a few ways you can look at the modes without going too deep into it. It's just a major scale with a lowered seventh note. But this really, what I would like to talk about, as I said earlier in my chord tone soloing, is I don't think about scales too much when I'm soloing. I don't mean that in a pompous way, like I don't think about, I find I play better if I think about the chord. So if you're playing A Mixolydian, there's A7, right? You're playing it over an A7 chord. So I'm thinking, so I have an arpeggio course, blues arpeggio, and that's what I talk about there. So I know, I could think of everything else as pentatonic, but if I'm thinking about A7, which is spelled A, C sharp, E, and G, I'm thinking, so if I want to play, like this, all this kind of stuff. So what was that other stuff in between? That's a lot of work, what's in between. But what I am thinking is, I'm thinking the notes of A7. So I would highly suggest, instead of practice Mixolydian, but think about A7 and notes that are in the scale, and then, in the chord, and then start trying to figure out how you can dance around those notes to make it sound more interesting. That sounds kind of lame. So first thing, say if we're playing A7, I'm thinking blues scale. So I played A, C, C sharp, E, F sharp, A, G to A. So that is A Mixolydian except for this natural third. But what I was really thinking A7 with some added chord scale tones in between. So as you're going through Mixolydian and you think about the chord that you're playing over, and I wish I had thought about this way when I was learning this stuff at first. If I thought about the chord more often than the scale, I think I would have become a better player more quickly. Great TrueFire instructor and good friend of mine, Jason Laughlin, and I were having this discussion about, I don't say scales are overrated, you need to know them, but it's really about chord tones and arpeggios and seeing what notes are in each chord, and then, you know, working and embellishing the notes around those chords. Okay. Hendrik, hey man, how's it going, dude? All right. All right, I'm going through the list. A lot of questions. Thanks, everyone. This is great. Okay. After learning pentatonic positions all over the neck, what would be the next best scale for blues players to add some color and phrasing? Well, when you say pentatonic scales across the neck, I've found this, that people say, like, yeah, I know my pentatonic scales. And then you ask them to solo, and you go, this is for Jeff Sheets. When I'm playing with Robin Ford, which we joke around about, we do a lot of workshops together. And we had this discussion because people are asking us about diminished. We do a lot of workshops. And the same thing is he says this. He's like, I primarily play pentatonic scales. So when he says that, and when I say that, and when, like, you know, I know Corey Congiglia's got a course coming out on mixing major and minor pentatonic scales. It's the idea of mixing the two of them. It's being confident in playing using major pentatonic and minor pentatonic. So when you say the pentatonic scale is all positions over the neck, what I really, this is EW, what I'd really suggest doing is, this goes back to this thing in the beginning of this feed, is learning some vocabulary. So if you're talking about, you know, your classic B.B. King, you know, that came through me through Peter Green kind of stuff, you know, that, you know, that's all A major pentatonic, that kind of BB's box, you know. So when you say the pentatonic scales, you want to be able to do that kind of a thing too. Major pentatonic, once again, sort of outline those chord changes a little bit. So if I'm thinking like an A blues, a 4 chord. Yeah, the chord changes there, right? Then I go to my 5 chord, right? Four. Right, so I outlined my 1, my 4, and the 5 chords there. And that's a super important thing to think about. So when you think about pentatonic scales, they aren't just scales that I need to know across the finger, but they're so deep. There's so much stuff involved. A major, minor, pentatonic, mixing those, inflections, nuance, dynamics, all these things. So I would say, if you're talking about from a solo thing, really, really, I do this all the time. So I'm not just saying, I go back and reanalyze what I can do with the pentatonic scale. So I still think of myself as largely a pentatonic player with the other notes I could add in. All right. Do I strictly alternate or economy pick? Good question. Both. I do both. I worked really hard on economy picking and really hard on alternate picking, and I still work really hard on both. So I think to be a good player, at least from where I came from in terms of growing up with in the shred era, to do the sweep stuff, you know, let's turn my volume down here. Right? Then I needed to learn how to sweep arpeggio. But on a smaller angle, if I'm just playing, you know, like as my friend Tracy calls a humbadidla lick, right? So that is an economy picked lick because it's the only way it works, right? So I talk about this in my beginning blues guitar soloing, blues rock guitar soloing. So that lick, if you're thinking about that, is really important that you pick that properly. So I'm doing down, up, pull off, down, up, pull off. Because you're trying to pick all that, I can't do it. And this is much easier. So that is another way of thinking about economy picking. So when I started really analyzing that, there's certain licks that just made a lot more sense to economy pick, especially anything that's going across a few strings. If I want to just go, try that again. Yeah. Right? And if I'm playing a major scale, down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down, up, down, up. So I'll mix in alternate and economy because I think it's the most efficient way to do it. I do have to say, one thing that was really super helpful to me was that Troy Grady cracking the code. For years I was trying to do those Eric Johnson kind of licks. I just wasn't getting them. I thought, my friend Hendrik online had recommended I check him out, and just how he talks about this downward pick slanting and stuff. Not going to talk about what he does. That's his stuff, and it's great. Changed it for me. So that's alternate picking, but it's the way you pick. So that brings me to this one thing about you need to analyze the way you pick. And usually if I'm having trouble with a lick, it's because I'm not picking it correctly, or I'm just trying to play it too fast. I mean, there's that. But if I feel like I should be able to do this, almost all the time it comes from a fingering issue, like I'm just doing something stupid, or I'm just not picking efficiently. I can need to add in a hammer-on or a pull-off to make things smooth out a little bit. So hopefully that answers that question. Is Stanley enjoying the live stream? He's downstairs. Allie, I put Stanley downstairs because I didn't want him to run around. Yes, I do Skype lessons as well. Yes, for sure. You can reach me through my website at jeffmcerlain.com. All right. Here we go. Let's go back up here. A lot of questions. Wow. Hold on. Sorry, I just jumped ahead on all this stuff. Okay. I did an awesome C-sharp slow blues. Oh, yeah, that one. Sure, I'll talk about that in a minute. What's the best way to get those transcribed licks into memory? Jason Nesbitt. Practice. People often say, like, how do you do that? Or doesn't I practice a lot. And I feel like the guys who are better than me, whatever that is, they practice more than I do. Natural talent comes into play for sure, but it's overrated compared to practice. So take a small lick, a short idea, and just, beat the crap out of it. Keep on playing it. Keep on playing. You know what I mean? Like, try it in a different key, in a different position, be able to sing it to yourself in your head. Just take one idea, because that one little idea you can attach to another idea, and then you have two ideas or one longer idea. So that would be my recommendation on that, is to really take a small thing and really, really learn it and try to put it somewhere else. And I think a lot of times things start to roll because you start to develop your ear and your memory for music, and it really helps a lot. Okay. How fast can I play? I'll answer that one. How do you play a 335 comfortably? Mark Engel. This is a smaller size. That's the answer to that. That's why I like this guitar so much. So it's a little smaller. Where are the good jam sessions in New York City? I don't know. It's not the same city as it used to be when I was younger, unfortunately. What's the best path of your courses? Of my courses, I would always say, if you're just kind of new, I'd check out my beginning blues rock soloing and the survival guides, the rhythm guitar survival guide and the lead guitar survival guide, and something like the 30 authentic blues groups, because you're learning some old blues tunes. Okay. Collings pickups. Yeah, no, these are throwbacks in here. Tracy Farmer, you got my new record. Thank you very much. Okay. Learning other people. Sometimes people wig out if I mention learning Bach. However, Yeah, of course, learn Bach. Absolutely. I work on that stuff too. It's painful in the sense of it takes a long time. But yeah, I mean, yeah. It's been a while, but that's what I kind of wrote off the top of my head. But yeah, that's one of the Bach conventions in D minor. I know some other stuff, but I know I'm just going to mess them up, so I'd rather not embarrass myself. Do I have a warm-up routine? I think I covered that a little earlier. Just mainly scales starting off and just playing tunes. Yeah. Slow hand rules. I agree. Do you think of actual verbal phrases when you're playing? No. I know it sounds silly. I just try to think about music. I know that sounds really lofty. I don't mean it that way. I think about music. But I do. I just thinking about what sounds good. I'm trying to create a conversation or tell a story, all those kind of cliches, which are actually quite legitimate. They're cliches for a reason. So one thing that might help you, do I think of actual phrases when you're playing, verbal phrases, if I may just kind of leap ahead a little bit on this, is one thing that was really helpful for me, which answers sort of this other question, is if you want to work on soloing more efficiently, compose a solo. So like take a 12-bar blues or 24 bars, however many you want, and write a solo. This is my perfect solo, the best solo I can do today, and write it. You don't have to write it down, but just memorize it. So when you do that process, they had me do this at college, and went to Berkeley, and this is one of the assignments. You had to write a 34-bar jazz solo over a tune. And in doing that, you have to be able to perform it. So a lot of times you come up with some cooler stuff, and you end up not just playing aimlessly, which is kind of, I see a little kind of question was talking about that, or like soloing without any real purpose. So by composing a solo, because you want it to be something you'd want to listen to in retrospect, you're kind of forced to create something good, and you really want to think about it. So I do that, and some solos on the record, a lot were improvised, some were played a few takes. I'm like, I'm going to take that, I'm going to take this and kind of put it together and keep this. Or I did a few takes, and I took the first half, the last quarter of this one, and kind of put them together. Because, it's on a record. Live's live. You just off into the internet, or the Ethernet, as I should say. But someone like David Gilmour, what he will do is he will compose his solos. He will do a bunch of takes, figure out what he liked the most, and put it together and that's the solo. So Comfortably Numb is a famous one for that. He wrote both of those solos that way. So in terms of working on your phrasing and then practicing more efficiently and soloing without any kind of purpose, like you were saying here, messing around, that's one way to do it, is to actually compose a solo and learn it. And I've come up with some of my favorite lines. This is one of the fun things I love about doing a TrueFire courses, is that I can I work on solos, and I come up with some solos that I really like. And I'm like, oh, I've never done that before. So hopefully this is interesting. You love my melodic style. Thank you very much. What kind of distortion do I use? Boy, that's a loaded question. Well, I try to use the amp distortion from, if I got a good amp, which I fortunately do, like my 2 Rocks or my Marshall. Lots of good ones. The Deep Blue, Royal Blue Overdrive is really nice by Mad Professor. I like that. The Boxer Rock is great. My main boost is always a Klon KTR. I just love the Klon. Vemram has a really cool stuff. So there's like a basic really good one is the OCD or the Boxer Rock. Really good pedals. So kind of, I don't love distortion. It's more like overdrives. So that answers. Is there a pedal that you find you use commonly? Yeah, the Klon KTR all the time. That's like the main pedal for me in terms of if I'm going to go to a gig. And in variations, like I've got the Mythos Mythical Overdrive, and this is a Molnir, and it's great. The Klon kind of circuit, so I really like that a lot, especially to boost stuff. Okay, So in the chord tone soloing, this is from Walt. The chord tone soloing, is there a specific reason why you would focus on a third rather than the root or seventh other than third? Oh, it's a good question. Okay, so in the chord tone soloing course, I'm basically dealing with triads. So I have a root, the 3, and the 5th. You can sit on any of those notes. The reason why sometimes I try to stress something like the 3rd or the 5th, the root sounds cool, but the root is almost our most obvious choice. So if we're playing over an A blues, you know, whatever is that, you know. Yeah. You know, A, you know, like that can be kind of annoying. So if I hit the 3rd, to my 3rd, now here's my 3rd, my 4 chord, the flat 7, back to my 3rd, my 5 chord, flat 7, oh. So by focusing in on some of those other chord tones, you're really picking up some really great stuff. So the 3rd's great because it brightens things up. And these become choices. So the more you experiment with these, chord tone soloing, playing the changes, I talk about this. We'll be filming a new course coming up that digs even deeper into this stuff for soloing with triads in not the blues, you know, using it in improvisation. So I'm looking forward to that one because it's really how I think about stuff. And it's been cool. TrueFire, like Larry Carlton's courses, he thinks about triads all the time. And I found Robin thinks about triads all the time. So most players I know, and no matter how advanced they are, they're still thinking about triads. So that's makes things so much easier. Okay, if I had to listen to one player, who would it be other than Clapton? Oh, boy. Jeff Beck. Yeah, Jeff Beck. That would kind of easy for me. Someone say hi from Bangalore, India. Hello. How are you? I'm glad my courses have helped you. Thank you very much. Okay. Okay. I just finished my Take 5 blues bending course. You need some help on deciding where to go next. Well, you asked the question, Jacqueline. Blues arpeggios or chord tone soloing. If you're kind of into playing the blues, then I would go with blues arpeggios because the chord tone soloing isn't really blues. It's bluesy because I play bluesy, but if you're going to focus in on blues, I would definitely I would check out the blues arpeggios course. Can you explain how you'd use the call and response solo-like method? Yeah, sure. Let me just put on a track. I'll play and post it just talking. All right, this is a track. I stole this from David Grissom's course. Let me get this to the top. So. Right? Now here's my answer, right? Now another one, so a major. Okay, so when I think about this call and response, or if I think about these shorter phrases, that was an AAB, right? So I took an idea. I'm going to repeat it. Then the kind of the answer, you know. So by thinking about that call and response, I'm thinking like a vocal line, what somebody might sing over a blues. Call it Stormy Monday, but Tuesday's just as bad. I call it Stormy Monday, but Tuesday's just as bad. and then whatever that third line is that I never remember. So if I'm thinking about chord, if I'm thinking about soloing on something, a blues, I might start off using that kind of idea, especially if I have like an open lesson or open solo. I said the word lesson. An open solo, I'll think about pacing myself that way by using this AAB or call and response method for sure. Excuse me. D minor is the saddest key. Yes, hold on. That's a good question. This is from Thomas Forrest. Are there any creative techniques you can use to break away from common vocabulary and phrasing to come up with new phrases and so on? Yeah, once again, as I said a little earlier, I'm a little behind on the questions, is composing a solo. That was huge for me because and consciously try to compose something that doesn't use any of your cliches. Work in a position that you're not usually comfortable with. It's not about improvising, you're writing, and by doing that, you might start to experiment and find some really cool stuff. That's what I would recommend for you. And also, learning other people's stuff. Learn somebody who plays something that you don't normally play. Those are, it's not, I don't mean this any kind of sarcastic, it's not a mystery. Like, if I am bored with my playing or want something new, like I said earlier, I was working on some Schofield stuff because I don't have that. So I was curious as to what was going on, and I try to learn it. Okay. Right, we got our giveaway. Yes, we're giving away, yes. This record, signed copies from me and Robin. We both signed it. All right, Corey posted a pic with have no tip and a comment that you just try the side of the pic. Corey, whatever. Who's Corey? Who's this Corey? I'm waiting for him to try. Corey is actually a very good friend of mine. I want to talk about that for a second. I have been using this blue chip that a good friend of mine gave me, and I'm completely hooked on the blue chip pick, unfortunately, because they're not inexpensive, but they are awesome. So what I do is I use the pointy part for things that need a pointy part, like faster playing, and I do this in all the picks that I use, and I use the rounder side for more mellow stuff, all right? And oftentimes, I use the back for strumming chords. All right, so I'm using the flat part. There's a cool tip, right? Watch. Now I'm going to use the tip. Okay, and then the side. You hear a difference over the intent. But that back, you get a little more of a scratch, but you can kind of dig in and it cuts across the strings and it keeps the volume down a little bit. And I learned this from watching Robin play. Robin does not touch the volume knob on his guitar, so he plays loud. And all the volume differences are coming from his hands, which is, I'm more like, using the volume knob like that Jeff Beck and Clapton, changing stuff here. One is not necessarily better than the other. It was just fascinating when I asked him, I said, well, do you roll back on the volume? He's like, no, I never touch it. And everything came from the hand. So I was wondering how he was strumming, how he could do that rhythm guitar stuff and just get this, and it wasn't as loud. And I'm like, well, he's hitting pretty hard. And he uses the back part of the pick, the flat part. He uses like a regular pick, but he uses the flat part. So I was, what do you know? I didn't ever think about that. You can always learn something. So that's great. How do you deal with volume issues at gigs? Earplugs. All the time. Never play without them. I already have some ear damage from the few gigs I didn't wear earplugs, but earplugs, the good kind. I mean, I have fitted, molded ones. They don't fit anymore because they just kind of they shrink. But this is just these live music, just the musicians' earplugs. It's the only way. You have to do it. How did you like working with Robin Ford? I loved it. Yes, basically, yes. What kind of things do you do to make your solos connected and fluid? Practice. Record yourself. Record yourself, listen back, and go, wow, was that good or not? And be brutal. There's so many easy ways to record yourself. nowadays, and just listen back. And did it sound fluid? And just learn other people's stuff. Not so you're gonna sound like them, just so you can get the idea of how to phrase. And that's the big thing. That's really what you're kind of talking about. You enjoyed watching me play at NAMM. With my good friend, with your good friend James Hogan. Do you see myself? I hope so. James is one of my best buds. So I would love to collaborate with James. Yeah. All right. What strings do I use? I think I answered that. These are 10.5 Diodario, and I usually use Diodario 10s. Okay. Hey man, what's going on? Love your record. How do you go about creating good phrasing if you're composing, for example, a 24-bar solo? I don't know. I listen back. I just try to think about what I would imagine B.B. King would play, and I just aspire to play like that. You know, it doesn't really get any better in my mind. You know, are you using Universal Audio aux often? Yes, especially when recording. Absolutely, it's great. Can I comment on amp modelers and profilers live in the studio? I think they're great. Amp modelers, I'm using one right now. I'm using the Universal Audio. I'm using the Friedman Buxom Betty. I use them all the time. They're great to record with. I've used them on records. It's a great world. I live in New York City, so I can't go miking amps at volume. I just can't do it, or else my neighbors will be really upset with me. So I think they're great, man. Some of the modeling stuff now is spectacular. You can't tell the difference. I mean, and oftentimes a model in my case will sound better than the real thing because I don't have the mic, the situation to mic something properly. Oh, it's getting late. Okay. Hold on a sec. Why are marshals frowned on in blues clubs? Cream did it. Oh, well, because they're so loud. Everything's frowned on in a club because everything's so loud, you know? You know. Okay. What sort of percussions are in the jam? 12-bar, 8-bar blues, some variations on those. Some really, I thought, stuff you play at gigs. There's like a crossroads kind of feel. There's an up-tempo shuffle in G. There's an 8-bar blues, kind of a rockin' thing based upon song I do on gigs all the time, Mercury Blues. So I just kind of kept it to things that I find get called on gigs a lot. Hello from Antarctica. Wow, hello. Do I ever practice the looper pedal? Oh, yeah, all the time. That's a great question. Yes, all the time. Absolutely. Looper pedal is incredibly important. How do you get overwhelmed with so much to learn? Oh, I do get overwhelmed with so much to learn all the time. But then I realize that I can't learn all of it. And I just try to pick one thing and get really good at that. And then pick another thing and get good at that. And then pick another thing, get good at that. And then it's that and 38 years of playing guitar. Time and practice, you know. Sean Tubbs, hey man, how's it going? Sean Tubbs, spectacular guitar player. Thanks for checking it out, man. Okay, got a question there. Okay, when you were soloing over a one-chord vamp, how do you know when to end? With a band? Okay, that's something to think about. If you're playing over background tracks, right? Background tracks are for practicing. So if I have a 5-minute one-chord vamp, nobody's looking at each other. It's not real. Like that's a really important thing. I got a lot of students say, like, I'm playing along with this jam track and I'm running out of ideas. I'm like, well, yeah, you soloed for 5 minutes over a static, essentially a loop. You would never do that in the real world. So that's when you say, like, okay, I'm going to solo for 24 bars. So if I'm going to solo over a one-chord vamp at home with a loop, I'll just more or less practice ideas. But if I'm playing with the band, it's all about interacting. You're looking at each other. You're trying to build. You're trying to build something, and that's just the way. That's music. That's what we go to. That's why I play music. I don't play music to play with jam tracks like that. You know, stinks in many ways. It's a practice thing. It's just for practice. And when you get on a gig, it's about learning to interact with real people and create music. And like I said, this is why I play music. It's because that's the best thing in the world, is being involved in a great jam and everybody's locked in, you're looking at each other. And that takes practice too. So that's a big part of it. You're creating live music, and that's what you want to think about. And if you'll know if the drummer's following with you, he's bringing the everything up kind of crescendos, you kind of know when you're done. The worst, and this happens sometimes, is when you decide to go, I'm going to go one more, and you go, and you fall off the cliff, and then that happens all the time. Or, it's not your gig, and you're soloing, and you're done, and then you look at the band leader, like, keep going. You're like, but I was already up here. And then you're like, oh man, I got to start over back down there. All right. You took your workshop at the Crown and performed Freeway Jam. Awesome, man. Great. You did Freeway Jam. That's good. That's right. Hey John, how you doing, man? What's your favorite and best blues class on TrueFire? Any of mine. Of course. What helps you play from your heart and soul? I don't know. I'm just trying to connect. Like, you can practice that stuff. I think, not stuff. I work on that. You work on just making a connection to what you're hearing in your head and to what the track is. I mean, it can come down to working on your vibrato, That's just something very different than, right? Right, that's one thing. And in a new record I have, it goes it. It's one of the melodies in the song. And so I thought about it. How do I want to? The melody is, right? So that's not great. So what makes it different? Well, I want to think about how I can interpret that, So I think about it, I can bend into notes, I can vibrato, I can slide. So I spent a lot of time working on that stuff. It's Jeff Beck who taught me that stuff. Like, not personally, but listening to, his version of Goodbye Pork Pie Hat. Yeah. So if you look at the song that I played, I have a direct line to where I feel like I kind of got some of that stuff. So it's how would somebody sing? So it's like, how would I sing the song? And so how do I practice playing from the heart? You need to practice that. Singers practice their vibrato, violinists practice their vibrato, or interpreting songs. So you can't, it's folly to think that people just are able to do this. It's all work. There's no secret. Work. It's just work. It's practice. Practice, practice, practice. If I can't do something, it's because I'm not practicing enough. Period. And then you'd have to connect the idea into your head, like, well, how much of my life do I want to spend practicing? You know what I mean? And those kind of things. Those are conscious decisions. But for me, it's about practice. And as I got older, the more and more clear that is. That's it. There's no magic. Some people have more ability after a certain point. Like some of the people I play with, it's really intimidating because they're so great. But they never didn't not practice their butts off. So, okay, I think we're kind of done. So let me just run over a few things once again before I cut off here. CD Baby, all your streaming stuff. Check out Rob and I will be doing a workshop at Sweetwater at the end of next month, and we're doing a bunch of dates on the road. So if you're in, check on my Facebook page. I have those listed there. I have a new TrueFire course coming out called In the Jam. That's coming out. Looking forward to that. Oh, yeah, I'm going to be in Italy at the end of June with Josh Smith and Ariel Posen. We're doing the Umbria Blues Festival next. Again, I did it last year with Matt Schofield and David Grissom. And so this year we have TrueFire's got now Josh Smith, and we have Ariel Posen, so I'm looking forward to that. And then the Crown Guitar Festival, I will be teaching with David Grissom, who's a real good friend of mine as well. So, yeah, everyone, thanks. And the giveaway for the record, thank you, TrueFire, the giveaway for the record, that link right there. And thanks, everyone. I really appreciate it. And I will see you all soon. See you on the road. See you there.